My name is Nadia Terrell. I'm 36. 4 weeks after we buried my father, my sister stood in my Aunt Colleen's living room, looked at 9 members of our family, and said, with a patience she had clearly rehearsed, "Dad would have wanted me to have it. He just wasn't thinking clearly at the end." She meant the lake house. She meant the brokerage account. She meant $310,000 in assets my father had spent 40 years building. What she didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that 11 months before he died, my father sat in his recliner, opened the camera on his phone, pressed record, and spoke for 14 minutes and 31 seconds. He addressed both of us by name. He explained exactly what he was leaving, and exactly why. And he named, one by one, the specific moments my sister had refused to show up during his illness. That recording was on a thumb drive in my purse, 6 feet from where she was standing. Before I tell you what happened in that room, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I always wonder how far a story like this travels. Let me start where it actually begins. Not with the family meeting, not with the recording, but with my father, Gerald Terrell, and the life he built with 2 hands that never once asked for applause. My father bought the house on Lake Waccamaw in Columbus County, North Carolina, in 1987. He was 32, 2 years into his marriage to my mother, Lorraine, and working as a field supervisor for Duke Energy. The house was a 3-bedroom A-frame on a half-acre lot at the end of Cypress Landing Road, 60 feet from the water. He paid $74,000 for it. The mortgage was a 30-year fixed at 9.2%, which sounds insane now but was standard then. He paid it off in 23 years by sending an extra $150 every quarter and never missing a single due date, not once in 276 payments. He called it the overpay trick. It wasn't a trick. It was discipline. He kept the payment coupon book in the top drawer of his roll-top desk in the den. I saw him open it once when I was maybe 9 or 10, running his thumb along the stamped receipts the way someone else might flip through photographs. He didn't say anything. He just looked at it and closed the drawer. I didn't understand it then. I understand it now. That house was everything to him. Not because it was expensive, it wasn't, but because of what it represented. He grew up in a 2-room rental in Lumberton. His father drove a pulpwood truck and died at 51 from a heart attack on a logging road outside Laurinburg. My father was 19 when it happened. He dropped out of community college, got hired at Duke Energy as a lineman's apprentice, and climbed the ladder 1 rung at a time for 37 years. He told me once, sitting on the dock at the lake with his feet in the water, "Nadia, the first time I held a deed with my name on it, I understood why my daddy worked himself to death. He was trying to get here. He just ran out of road. That sentence lives in me. It lives in the walls of that house." My mother died in 2004 when I was 16. Ovarian cancer. Fast, ugly, final. 7 months from diagnosis to funeral. My father never remarried. He raised me and my sister, Jolene, alone from that point. Jolene is 3 years older. 39 now. Here is the pattern that defined our family, and if you come from a family like mine, you already know it before I describe it. Jolene was the visible one. She was the one who got the solos in the church choir at Grace Tabernacle. She was the one who gave the toasts at Thanksgiving and Christmas. She was the one who posted photos of Dad on Father's Day, with long captions about gratitude and legacy, and how blessed she was to have a father who taught her strength. She was genuinely good at the performance of love. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it's precise. I was the one who drove to his house every Thursday evening to mow the lawn, because his knees were going, and he wouldn't hire a service because he said that was paying someone to do what family should do. I was the one who sat with him at the VA clinic in Fayetteville for 4 hours, when he had his rotator cuff surgery in 2018, and couldn't lift his right arm for 6 weeks afterward. I was the one who drove him to physical therapy 3 times a week for 2 months, a round trip of 1 hour and 10 minutes each way. I set up his auto pay for the property taxes when he started forgetting due dates, $3,200 a year in Columbus County. I balanced his checkbook starting at 22 because his handwriting was getting shaky, and he was too proud to admit it. I drove him to the ophthalmologist in Wilmington when his cataracts started clouding and he couldn't read the bank statements anymore. Jolene lived 40 minutes away in Whiteville. I live 12 minutes from him in Bolton, in a 2-bedroom house I rented on Hallsborough Road. Proximity is not an excuse for everything, but it explained a lot. She chose distance. I chose presence. That's not martyrdom. That's math. There's a phrase people use, the responsible child. It sounds like a compliment, until you realize it's a job description no one agreed to, and no one pays you for. You just wake up one day, and you're the one the hospital calls at 3 a.m. Not because they chose you, because you're the number on file. By 2019, my father had built 2 significant assets beyond his pension. The lake house, which he owned free and clear, assessed at $290,000 by the county, and a Fidelity brokerage account he'd been contributing to since 1998, mostly low-cost index funds, and some Duke Energy stock he'd accumulated through the employee purchase plan at a discount. The account was worth $310,000 as of his last quarterly statement in January 2023. He also had the pension, $2,800 a month from Duke, and Social Security. He wasn't wealthy, he was solvent. That's a different thing entirely. And it was a thing he'd earned with 37 years of showing up in the same hard hat, rain or heat, every morning at 5:45. My father was diagnosed with ALS in March 2022, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. The neurologist at UNC Medical Center in Chapel Hill, Dr. Yolanda Pratt, told him the median survival from symptom onset was 2 to 5 years, depending on progression. She said it gently, the way doctors learn to say things that end worlds without raising their voices. Dad took it the way he took everything. He nodded once. He didn't cry. He drove home, sat in his recliner, and called me. Not Jolene. Me. He said, "Nadia, I need you to come over. Bring a notebook." I was at his house in 11 minutes. That was the beginning. Over the next 3 months, I helped him organize everything. We sat at his kitchen table, the same pine table he'd built in 1992, from lumber he milled himself at a friend's sawmill outside Cerro Gordo, and went through every document he owned. The will, the deed, the brokerage statements, the pension paperwork from Duke, his burial insurance through Colonial Penn, his DNR directive, his truck title, his Social Security card, the original survey plat for the lake house property. I put it all in a 3-ring binder with labeled tabs and a printed table of contents. He watched me do it, slowly, because his hands couldn't help anymore. And he said, "You're the only person in this family who understands that love is paperwork." He said it like a joke. It wasn't. I told Jolene about the diagnosis the same week. She cried on the phone for 10 minutes. She said, "Oh my God, Nadia, I'll come down every weekend. I promise." She came down 4 times in the next 11 months. 4 times. I counted, and so did he. The first visit was in April 2022, 2 weeks after the diagnosis. She brought flowers, yellow tulips, Dad's least favorite, he liked marigolds, and a chicken casserole from the Publix deli. She stayed for 3 hours. She rearranged the pillows on his couch and told him he looked good, actually. He did not look good. The second visit was in July, for his 68th birthday. She brought a carrot cake from a bakery in Whiteville and took 6 photographs. She posted the best one on Instagram, Dad smiling with frosting on his lip, and wrote a caption that said, "My rock, my hero, time is precious." 87 likes, 12 comments. She left before dinner. I drove to Bojangles and brought him a 2-piece combo, because it was his birthday, and that's what he wanted. Not carrot cake. The third visit was in October, when he had a fall in the bathroom at 1:40 in the morning, and I called her in a panic at 2 a.m. She answered on the 4th ring. She said, "Is he okay?" I said, "I don't know. I'm waiting for the paramedic." She said, "I'll leave first thing in the morning." She arrived at 1:15 the next afternoon. By then, he'd been checked out at the ER, and I'd already brought him home, installed a shower bench, and put non-slip mats on every hard floor in the house. The 4th visit was Christmas. She stayed for 5 hours. Between those 4 visits, I was there. Every single day. I modified the bathroom with grab bars I bought from Lowe's for $187, and installed myself using a YouTube video and a borrowed drill. I built a plywood ramp over the front steps and painted it gray to match the porch. I learned how to operate the BiPAP machine when his breathing started to decline in August. I sat on the phone with the respiratory therapist for 45 minutes taking notes. I cut his food into small pieces when his hands couldn't grip a fork steadily enough to eat without shaking. I cleaned him when he couldn't clean himself, and I did it in a way that let him keep his dignity, because that mattered more to him than anything, and I knew that because I paid attention. Jolene sent texts. "How's Dad today? Tell him I love him. I'll try to come next weekend. Work is so crazy, but I'm thinking about him constantly." She tried a lot. She arrived rarely. That is not the same thing. I don't say this to perform resentment or build a case. I say it because when the will became public, Jolene told every relative who would listen that she and I had been equally involved in Dad's care. That is a lie you can only believe if you weren't there, and she wasn't. In June 2022, 3 months after the diagnosis, my father did something I didn't know about until after he died. He sat in his recliner, the brown leather La Z-Boy he'd bought from a furniture outlet in Lumberton in 2010, and opened the camera app on his Samsung Galaxy. He propped the phone on the side table next to his chair, leaning it against a stack of Field and Stream magazines, and he pressed record. He spoke for 14 minutes and 31 seconds. He was wearing a blue flannel shirt and khaki pants. His voice was steady. The ALS hadn't reached his speech yet, though his right hand trembled slightly against the armrest. He looked directly into the camera, and he addressed both of us by name. I will not reproduce the full recording here, because some of it belongs only to me, and to the silence of that house. But I will tell you the parts that mattered in the room where Jolene demanded her meeting. He said, "Jolene, I love you. I have always loved you, but I need to say something I should have said out loud years ago and didn't, because I thought you'd change, and because your mother would have wanted me to keep the peace. When I was diagnosed in March, I called Nadia. She came that same day with a notebook. I waited 3 weeks, 3 full weeks, for you to offer to help with anything. A grocery run, a ride, a phone call to the insurance company, anything at all, and you didn't. I don't say that to punish you. I say it because it's the truth, and I'm running out of time to waste on anything that isn't true." He said, "Nadia has driven me to 14 medical appointments between March and June. She installed grab bars in my bathroom. She built a ramp over my front steps with plywood and a borrowed drill. She set up the breathing machine. She reorganized my finances so I wouldn't have to worry about a late fee while I was losing the ability to hold a pen. Jolene, you have visited me 4 times since March. I know the exact number because I wrote it down in the notebook Nadia gave me. I wrote down every time either of you came." Nadia fills a page. "Your name is 4 lines. He said, "I am leaving the lake house and the Fidelity brokerage account to Nadia, not because I love her more. I love you both with everything I have left, but because she earned it. She was here. And presence is not a small thing. It's the whole thing." He said, "If you are watching this, it means I'm gone and someone, probably you, Jolene, is arguing about what's fair. So let me be clear. Fair is not equal. Fair is proportional. And Nadia's proportion of this family's weight has been larger than anyone else's, for longer than anyone wants to admit." Then he said one more thing, and this is the part I carry like a stone in my chest. "Nadia, I'm sorry I didn't say this to your face more often. I saw everything. Every Thursday evening, every clinic drive, every time you walked in tired and came back the next morning anyway. You are not the background of this family. You are the foundation. I just got so used to leaning on you that I forgot to say it out loud. That's my failure, not yours." He saved the video to a thumb drive. He put a piece of masking tape on it and wrote, in handwriting that was already starting to shrink, "For after, play for both." He placed it in the fireproof lockbox in his bedroom closet, underneath his will. I found it when I opened the lockbox 3 days after the funeral, following the instructions he'd left with his attorney, Mitchell Cabe of Cabe and Hewitt in Whiteville. My father died on February 11th, 2023, a Sunday. It was 38 degrees outside and overcast. I was sitting in the chair next to his bed, holding his left hand. The hospice nurse, a woman named Beverly, was in the kitchen. Jolene was not there. She had said she'd come that weekend. She didn't. She later told Aunt Colleen she had a conflict. Beverly came in at 11:14 a.m. and listened to his chest and looked at me and shook her head once. I sat with him for 20 minutes after. I didn't call anyone. I just sat with him because I wasn't ready to let the last quiet we'd ever share become noise. The funeral was February 16th at Grace Tabernacle Church in Bolton. 211 people signed the guest book. Jolene gave the eulogy. She stood at the pulpit in a black wrap dress and spoke beautifully about how Dad had taught her the meaning of strength and perseverance, and how the lake house symbolized everything he'd worked for. She said, "He built that place for us, for this family." Us. I sat in the second row with my hands in my lap and thought, you visited 4 times in 11 months. You didn't install the grab bars. You didn't learn how to operate the BiPAP. You didn't cut his steak into pieces small enough that he wouldn't choke on it. You posted photographs and called them love. That is not the same thing as showing up. I said nothing. I have had a lot of practice saying nothing. The will was filed with the Columbus County Clerk of Court on February 22nd. Mitchell Cabe handled the probate. The will was clean, properly executed, properly witnessed by 2 of Mitchell's paralegals on August 3, 2022. When Dad still had full use of his hands and full command of his mind. The provisions were straightforward. To me, the lake house at Cypress Landing Road and the Fidelity brokerage account, valued at $310,400 as of the January 2023 quarterly statement. To Jolene, his truck, a 2017 Ford F-150 XLT with 64,000 miles, valued at approximately $24,000. His pension survivor benefit, $1,400 per month, and his complete collection of hand tools, accumulated over 40 years. It was not equal. It was not designed to be. Jolene called me on February 24th, 2 days after the will was filed. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't ask if I was sleeping. She said, "Nadia, did you know about this?" I said, "Yes." She said, "And you didn't tell me." I said, "It wasn't mine to tell. It was Dad's decision." She said, "He wasn't thinking clearly. The ALS was affecting his cognition. His judgment was compromised." I said, "The will was executed in August 2022, 5 months after diagnosis. His neurologist at UNC confirmed full cognitive capacity in a letter dated July 28th. Mitchell has the original." She was quiet for 6 seconds. I counted them. Then she said, "This isn't right," and she hung up. That was the beginning of the campaign. Over the next 4 weeks, Jolene called every relative who would listen. She called Aunt Colleen, our father's older sister, who lived in Tabor City. She called Uncle Darnell, our mother's brother in Fayetteville. She called Cousin Rita, who hadn't spoken to our father in 3 years, but suddenly had strong opinions about his estate. She called Howard Gibbs, Dad's best friend, a retired electrician who lived on the other side of the lake and had been fishing with him every Saturday for 22 years. Her message was consistent, polished, and devastating in its simplicity. Dad wasn't in his right mind. Nadia was closer to the situation and may have influenced the process. The fair thing is to split everything 50-50. She used the phrase, "what Dad would have wanted," so many times it became a liturgy. She said it to Aunt Colleen at a Cracker Barrel in Whiteville over sweet tea. She said it to Uncle Darnell in a 40-minute phone call. She said it in a group text to 7 family members that included me. I don't think she meant to add me to the thread, but she did. The text said, "I think we all know Dad would have wanted his girls to share equally. Nadia is being influenced by that lawyer and isn't thinking about what's right for the family. I don't want to fight. I just want what's fair." I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and went for a drive. I drove all the way to the lake house and sat in the driveway for 30 minutes with the engine running. I wasn't angry. I was exhausted. Grief and betrayal feel similar. They both hollow you out. But grief leaves you sad, and betrayal leaves you precise. That was the moment I stopped being patient. Not because the text was wrong, it was, but because she had moved from grief into strategy. She wasn't mourning our father. She was lobbying for his assets, and she was doing it by rewriting history in real time. I called Mitchell Cabe. I called my own attorney, Denise Fuqua, a probate litigator at Fuqua and Merritt in Lumberton, and I took the thumb drive out of my nightstand drawer, where I had been keeping it since I found it in the lockbox, and I put it in my purse. I left it there for 18 days, waiting. On March 14, 2023, Jolene got what she asked for: a family meeting. She had organized it herself at Aunt Colleen's house in Tabor City. She invited Aunt Colleen, Uncle Darnell, Cousin Rita, Howard Gibbs, and 2 of our mother's cousins who had driven down from Raleigh, Sandra and Vivian. 9 people total, plus me and Jolene, 11 in the room. Aunt Colleen's house smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. The dining room table had been cleared. There were folding chairs brought in from the garage. Someone had set out a plate of butter cookies that nobody touched. I arrived at 4 p.m. Jolene was already there, sitting at the head of the dining table with a yellow legal pad and a printed spreadsheet showing the estimated value of Dad's assets, alongside a proposed 50-50 split. She had columns. She had highlights. She had done the math. She had prepared for the wrong argument. Aunt Colleen opened the meeting by saying this was a family conversation, not a legal proceeding, and that she hoped we could find a resolution that honors Gerald's memory. Jolene nodded solemnly. She was performing grief again. I recognized the choreography. Jolene spoke first. She was calm, articulate, sympathetic. She was good at this. She always had been. She said Dad's illness had compromised his judgment. She said the will didn't reflect the Gerald we all knew. She said she believed in her heart that he would have wanted his daughters treated equally. She said I had been closer to the situation and may have inadvertently influenced the estate planning process. She used the word inadvertently 3 times. She did not use the word manipulated, but she circled it the way a hawk circles a field: patient, deliberate, never quite landing. She spoke for 12 minutes. She didn't raise her voice once. She referenced the spreadsheet. She referenced fairness. She said, "All I'm asking is that we honor Dad's real wishes." When she finished, the room was quiet. Uncle Darnell had his arms crossed. Rita was nodding. Aunt Colleen looked at me and said, "Nadia, do you want to respond?" I said, "I do, but not with words. With Dad's." I reached into my purse. I took out the thumb drive. The room shifted slightly. You could feel it in the air, that small collective adjustment when people realize something they didn't expect is about to happen. I plugged the thumb drive into Uncle Darnell's laptop, which was sitting on the sideboard from when he'd been checking something earlier. I connected the laptop to Aunt Colleen's television using the HDMI cable that was already there from their Netflix setup. It took 30 seconds. The room was silent for all of it. Jolene said, "What is that?" I said, "Dad recorded a message 11 months before he died. He addressed both of us by name. He asked that it be played for both of us. I believe this is the time." I pressed play. My father's face filled the 55-inch screen, the blue flannel, the brown recliner, the stack of Field and Stream magazines propping up his Samsung Galaxy, the den wall behind him with the framed photo of our mother from 1998, his steady voice, his clear, unmedicated, fully present eyes. The room went silent in a way I have never experienced before or since. Not the silence of attention, the silence of reckoning. The silence of 11 people realizing simultaneously that they were about to hear testimony from a man who couldn't be cross-examined, couldn't be pressured, couldn't be rewritten, because the dead don't negotiate. For 14 minutes and 31 seconds, my father spoke. He named the 4 visits. He named the 14 appointments. He named the grab bars and the borrowed drill. He named the ramp. He named the BiPAP machine. He named the notebook. He named the autopay. He named the checkbook and the ophthalmologist. He named the Thursday evenings. And he said the line I already told you, the one about presence. Presence is not a small thing. It's the whole thing. And he said the line about fairness. Fair is not equal. Fair is proportional. And he looked directly into the camera and said Jolene's name the way a father says a name when love and disappointment share the same breath. When the video ended, the screen went black. Nobody moved. Aunt Colleen had her hand over her mouth. Uncle Darnell was staring at the floor. Sandra, our mother's cousin, was pressing a napkin to her eyes. Howard Gibbs, Dad's best friend, the man who fished with him every Saturday, was crying, in the way men of a certain generation cry, with a locked jaw and controlled breathing and eyes fixed on nothing. Jolene was staring at the blank screen. Her yellow legal pad was still open in front of her. The spreadsheet with its highlighted columns sat untouched. She hadn't written a single new word. Cousin Rita, the one who hadn't spoken to Dad in 3 years, was the first to break the silence. She said, very quietly. He knew. He knew exactly what was happening, and he wrote it down. Jolene stood up slowly. She said, "That video doesn't prove anything. He was sick when he recorded it." But her voice was different. The rehearsal was gone. The calm was cracking at the seams. This wasn't performance anymore. This was real. Howard Gibbs looked at her from across the table and said, in a voice that was low and tired and absolute, "Jolene, I drove your father to the cardiologist 6 times last spring." His mind was sharper than mine. He wasn't confused. He was disappointed. That word, disappointed. It landed like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples touched every wall in that room. Jolene picked up her legal pad. She put it in her bag. She looked at me once, and I saw something in her face I hadn't seen before, something that wasn't anger, and wasn't grief, and might have been the beginning of understanding, though I can't be sure, and she left. She didn't slam the door. She just closed it behind her. That was worse. A slammed door is an argument. A closed door is a conclusion. The probate was finalized on April 28, 2023. Mitchell Cabe filed the final accounting with the Columbus County Clerk. The lake house was transferred to my name, full warranty deed, recorded instrument number 2023-004219, at the Columbus County Register of Deeds. The fidelity account was retitled into my name. Jolene received the truck, the pension survivor benefit, and the tools. As specified. As intended. She contested nothing after the family meeting. The attorney she'd been consulting, a man named Victor Hale in Whiteville, advised her, correctly, that the recording, combined with the neurologist's cognitive capacity letter, Mitchell's file notes, and the properly witnessed execution of the will, made any legal challenge functionally unwinnable. She would spend money to lose publicly. He told her that. She listened. The fallout moved outward, the way it always does when a carefully constructed story collapses in a small community. Cousin Rita stopped returning Jolene's calls. Aunt Colleen called Jolene twice in April, and was told both times that she needed space. Uncle Darnell sent me a single text message that said, "Your dad raised you right." Howard Gibbs came by the lake house the following Saturday morning. He sat on the dock with me and said nothing for a long time, just looking at the water. Then he said, "Gerald told me about the video last summer. He asked me if I thought it was too harsh. I told him it wasn't harsh enough." He smiled when he said it. It was the saddest smile I've ever seen on a living person. Jolene's husband, Craig, a manager at an auto parts distributor in Whiteville, called me in May. He was careful, measured. He said Jolene was struggling. He said she felt blindsided and was having trouble sleeping. I said, "Craig, she wasn't blindsided. She was corrected. There's a difference." He didn't argue. He thanked me for picking up the phone and hung up. That was a consequence I hadn't planned for. Craig was a decent man who worked hard and stayed out of family disputes. He didn't deserve to carry the weight of Jolene's miscalculation in his own home. But that's what happens when lies collapse. The debris doesn't stay in one room. Here's what I didn't feel. Triumphant. I felt clean. I felt heavy. Those two things lived in the same breath, and I stopped trying to separate them. I did not sell the lake house. The appraisal in March 2023 came back at $318,000. My financial advisor, Pamela Osei at Edward Jones in Lumberton, said I could net roughly $290,000 after closing costs and capital gains. That money would have changed my life. I thought about it for exactly 1 week. Then I drove to the lake house on a Saturday morning, unlocked the front door, and sat in my father's recliner. It still smelled like him, Old Spice and machine oil, and the faint ghost of the cherry pipe tobacco he gave up in 2015, but whose scent never fully left the cushion. I kept it. Mom's house, Dad's house, My house now. I used $18,000 from the brokerage account to replace the dock, which had been rotting since 2019. I repainted the A-frame exterior, the same forest green Dad had chosen in 1994, Sherwin-Williams evergreen fog. I fixed the screen door he'd been meaning to get to for 2 years. I kept the Field and Stream magazines on the side table in the same stack he'd used to prop up the phone. I started renting the house on weekends through a local property manager, Carla Edmonds at Waccamaw Retreats, at $175 a night. The income covers the property taxes and insurance with enough left over to put $200 a month into a maintenance fund. I go there on Thursdays. I sit on the dock with my feet in the water. I bring a notebook, the same kind I used to bring to his kitchen table. I write in it sometimes. Grocery lists, mostly. But sometimes I write things he said that I don't want to forget. Some habits don't end because someone dies. They end when you stop honoring them. In September 2023, 7 months after the funeral, Jolene called me. Not 17 times. Once. She said, "I was wrong. Not about the will. I still struggle with that. But about everything before it. I told myself I was busy. I told myself you had it handled. I told myself that checking in by text was the same as being there. But the truth is, I chose not to be there, Nadia. I chose it, and I let you carry all of it alone because it was easier for me, and that's not something I get to undo." 5 sentences. No decoration, no but at the end. No, I hope you understand. I said, "Thank you, Jolene. We haven't spoken since. That's not a punishment. It's just where we are. The door isn't sealed, but I'm not the one who needs to walk through it this time. I spent 30 years walking through doors for other people. This one, somebody else has to open. There's one more thing. Last October, I decided to reupholster the recliner. Same brown leather, better padding. Dad would have appreciated the practicality. When the upholstery shop pulled the cushion out of the frame, there was a folded piece of notebook paper wedged between the seat and the back panel. My father's handwriting, small and tight by then, the muscles in his hand already beginning to fail. It said, "Nadia, 37 years at Duke, 276 mortgage payments, 1 doc, 2 daughters, 1 who showed up. That's the math. GT." He must have written it around the time he made the recording. Maybe it was a draft of what he wanted to say. Maybe it was a note to himself. Maybe it was something he left behind the way he left everything, without announcement, without fanfare, and with complete faith that the right person would find it. I framed it. It hangs on the wall of the lake house, next to the window that looks out over the water, in the same spot where he used to stand every morning at dawn with a cup of black coffee, saying nothing, because the lake said it for him. I want to say something to you directly, and then I'll go. If you are the person in your family who drives to the appointments, sets up the auto-pay, installs the grab bars, files the paperwork, learns how to operate the machines, and answers the phone at midnight, and no one stands at a pulpit and talks about your sacrifice, I see you. You are not invisible because you don't matter. You are invisible because the people around you have confused your consistency with your capacity. They think because you always show up, showing up must be easy for you. It isn't. You just decided it was more important than being tired. And you kept deciding it, every day, until the deciding became invisible too. Document everything. Record what matters. And if someone stands in a room full of your relatives and says, "Dad would have wanted me to have it," make sure Dad's own voice can answer. Would you have played the recording? If this story made you think of someone in your family, someone who carried the weight quietly and never got the eulogy, drop the word presence in the comments. I read every one. This story is fictional, created for dramatic entertainment, education, and reflection. Sometimes the people who say the least leave the clearest records.